Oh, Mary Chrysler. Dude, these things are huge. Oh my god. I can't even fit them in the frame. What is up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new reaction, and welcome to day 2 of Reactmas. We are uploading 25 days straight leading up to Christmas, and today we are watching 7 myths British people believe about America.
You see, after doing part 1 and having lived in the United States for 14 years and 12 days, I realised that there were just lots of falsehoods that I used to believe about the United States of America, thus warranting a second video. And so, without further ado, here are 7 myths that British people believe about the United States, part 2.
Everyone owns a swimming pool.
When I lived in England, who came from a wealthy family, and it was always the topic of conversation among people whenever we'd speak about this person that they had a swimming pool, and this was very, very unusual for Britain. But American television shows and Jack Black's Instagram page tend to give us this impression that every house in America has its own swimming pool. And
I mean, a lot of people have their own swimming pool. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely not everybody. Like, growing up, we never had our own. If we wanted to go swimming, we'd go to a neighbor's house or a friend's house that had one. But yeah, a lot of people have swimming pools in their backyard. It's really common.
This isn't even close to being true, because a lot of Americans I speak to say they can't even afford a swimming pool, but some would say that even if they could, they wouldn't want to put up with the maintenance of it. Because
a lot of people will get one, like they'll save up some money, get one, and then never even use it, or like get tired of having to spend all the money to upkeep it. That's why if I want to go swimming, and my girlfriend's parents, they have a pool. They take care of it. That's the best thing. It's always better to know somebody with a pool than have your own pool.
You know, it takes a lot to keep that thing clean and chlorified and whatever else you have to do to it. And most houses I've been to simply don't have one. But I will say this, I think they are slightly more prevalent in the US than they are in Britain. Some houses will have them. Some apartment complexes have them. In fact, I lived at one that did, and it was always packed, so I never went in it.
Yeah, and that's kind of sketchy. Like, there's like most like hotels or motels, they'll have one, but the amount of just think about the amount of random people that's peed in that pool. It's gonna be a no-go for me. You can road trip the country in a day.
The size of the United States, but there's also something to be said of the slender size of Britain. So growing up there, you very much got used to this idea that you could drive anywhere in the country well within a day, actually within a third of a day. And because Britain becomes the kind of yardstick by which you see the rest of the world, you sort of assume you can do that in other countries. And for me, the United States was surely no different. So when I visited in 2004, my ex-American girlfriend probably laughed at me when I suggested we do New York, California, and the Grand Canyon in a single week. Because it is big, right? One of the shortest routes from the East Coast to the West Coast is Savannah to San Diego. It takes 36 hours by car. Now, if you were to drive...
Look, we went, it was me and my entire family. So we had, like, what, 7 people, all in a van and a bunch of little kids. It took us 16 hours to drive from Kentucky to South Carolina. Yeah, it's not even that far. It should have been like a 12, 13-hour trip, but it took us 3 extra hours because we had to stop every freaking 30 minutes to go pee or whatever. But it takes forever, almost an entire day, just to drive from Kentucky to South Carolina. That's just a couple states over, so yeah.
This route, which seems unlikely, you might be thinking, it's only a day and a half, we'll bring DVDs. Just remember that you have to eat and sleep and go to the toilet and take pictures of yourself over something iconic. You're probably not doing this journey in less than 3 days, so that's more or less half your week gone with just that. And that's the shortest route. If for whatever reason you find yourself driving from Fort Kent, Maine, all the way to Seattle, Washington, that's about 50 hours by car, and even then you have to cheat by driving through Canada.
Gosh, how long, I'm gonna look it up, how long does it take to go from the bottom of the UK to the top of the UK? How long does it take to drive across Great Britain? It takes about 15 or 16 hours to drive the 837 miles across Great Britain from Land's End to John O'Groats. So it would take the same amount of time to drive all the way across Great Britain as it did for us to go from Kentucky to like 3 states over in South Carolina. That's insane. That just truly puts into perspective how damn big America really is. Like, it's crazy.
I am old enough to remember the 1994 World Cup, and for those of you who don't remember it, it was staged here in the United States. And at the time, I remember a lot of the narrative coming out of the British media was that the United States and its people don't care about football/soccer. But now that I live here, I've discovered that that is still sort of true.
Yeah.
But not to the degree I...
Yeah, it's not as bad as you might think. Like, I just recently tried to get into football with the World Cup going on and everything. But for the most part, growing up, I watched basketball and I watched American football. That was about it. Like, I knew people that played soccer, but I never went to their matches. I never sat down and watched a game on the TV or anything. But here recently, it's kind of taken over. A lot of people are starting to get into it, including myself. Like, a lot of people, I think this World Cup is going to unlock a bunch of new fans when it comes to the sport of football. But yeah, it's definitely not like the main sport when it comes to America.
Thought it would be. I mean, sure, soccer is still way behind the big four, so NFL, baseball, hockey, and basketball.
Yeah.
But whenever I've been into one of those authentic British-style pubs that you find in the United States, and there's a football match on from the Premier League, there's usually quite a lot of people in there, and I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, that's just other English immigrants. And that is partly true, but you'll hear a lot of American accents too. And, you know, they'll be bashing the referee along with the rest of us, not literally, we get a bit rowdy. And here in Chicago, where you have the Chicago Fire, I often meet soccer fans proudly wearing the jersey of Manchester United. And once every 4 years, we have this little thing come around called the World Cup. And if the United States is involved in that, as they are at this one, Americans start to take an interest.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've noticed. Like, people I never would have thought, like on Twitter, would even consider watching a single match of football are instantly in love with it simply because America's involved with it. So that's going to be another thing. Since America's in it, there's going to be a lot more Americans trying to get into it just to support their country. But I really think soccer is going to start taking over in America just because so many more people are starting to get into it. And like, bro, it's worth it. It's so fun, I swear.
They lose to England this Friday. The other thing to mention is that soccer is played quite widely in American schools, right? You'll just be driving down the road and you'll be like, ooh, there's a goalpost in America, and they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And this is because American girls and boys seem to play soccer all the way throughout their education and then just stop. Although some do go on to play professionally, and in the case of the women's team, routinely win the World Cup.
And you know what's crazy? Every school I've ever been to, like I went to personally, our soccer, like, goal or football goal was on our American football field. Like, our American football field and our football field was the same exact field. Like, they had to share a field. Americans pronounce words wrong.
Ah, yes,
that's
that
facts.
long-held belief that it is in fact Americans who are wrong with their pronunciations. Well, firstly, has anyone ever stopped to consider that maybe none of us are wrong? That there isn't a right way to say aluminium, there are just different ways.
True.
And secondly,
true.
I constantly get surprised while researching for this channel that American pronunciation of words or spelling of words or just the words themselves are often more in line with the word's origin. Take the word herb, for example, and watch my YouTube short about that very thing. The H, which most Americans drop, was originally silent in French. The way Americans pronounce the L's differently when they say paella is very much in line with how they do it in Spain. Our own British offering of paella isn't. And I could run down hundreds more examples, but that's what my YouTube shorts are for.
See, when it comes to pronunciations, y'all know I'm literally the worst at it. English is tough. But the one thing I truly believe is that we both speak English, but y'all speak English and we speak American English. Like, there is a big difference. And then you have me who speaks this, like, weird, just confusing, doesn't really make sense, just a bunch of scrambled up letters of English. That's what I speak. Yeah, I do agree with him that, you know, maybe we're not saying it wrong, we're just saying it different. But come on. We're saying it wrong. Aluminium, what the? It's aluminum, alright?
During my life on this planet, I've definitely heard British people make the assertion that Americans are rude. And it's a weird thing because, of course, there are rude Americans. You're never going to get rid of those. But there are rude British people too. And rudeness is something you pretty much find everywhere.
Yeah.
And I have to say, at least in the Midwest, where I've lived in about 4 different cities now, I don't feel like I've encountered a higher degree of rudeness here than I did in the UK.
It's definitely where you are. Like, I feel like you're going to run into a lot more rude people if you're in a bigger city with a lot more people. But, like, if you're around here where I live, we got, like, I don't even know the population. But it's a small town, okay? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's an old country town. For the most part, people are alright, like decently nice. Again, you're gonna have one or two rude people here or there. But for the most part, everybody's pretty nice around here. But if you go 3 hours up to Louisville or something, and into some of these bigger cities, there's gonna be more people, and people just ain't, you know, as kind to other people as we are down here. But again, I feel like that's everywhere though. You go into a small town in the UK, people are probably gonna be a little bit nicer than how people are like in London or something. But y'all let me know what y'all think about that.
On the whole, just like with the UK, most people try to be polite. Actually, if anything, in the UK we have this thing among friends known as banter, in which we call each other names that if I said right now would probably get me demonetized. And you know, in my experience, that banter does spill over into rude territory, because sometimes Uncle Toby doesn't know when he's gone too far. So rudeness is sort of relative, and I tend to believe that there are no higher percentage of rude Americans than any other people on Earth.
Yeah.
I think instinctively we all think this about every country on Earth except our own. Because we know that our own country represents something of a rich tapestry of dialects, we just sort of become hyper aware of that fact and just assume that nowhere else in the world can say the same thing. And because I grew up in Britain, I was very much attuned to the fact that we had various Yorkshire dialects, Scouse, Mancunian, Geordie, Scottish dialects, Welsh dialects, Irish dialects, Cockney.
Yeah. It'd be real easy for British people to believe that we don't have that many accents. When you're coming from the UK that have so many dang accents is unbelievable. Like, compared to y'all, yeah, we don't have any.
But I didn't have that same awareness of American dialects. To us, there's just three. There's General American, whatever that is. There's the dialect used by mobsters in films set in New York. And then the South. And that's about it.
I mean, again, that's kind of it. There's just different variations of each of those.
Only after I lived here for a few years that I really started to hear quite a lot of differences in the sounds that would come from various parts of just the Midwest. You got the way they speak in Chicago, which is not that, was my best impersonation. You got the way they speak in Wisconsin, which I'm not even going to try to do. And then the way they speak in Indiana, which sounds closer to Southern in my opinion. And that's just the region I've lived in. You go to the East Coast, there's an absolutely mental amount of differences in the way people say words or the words themselves, especially if you're ordering a sub sandwich. Same in the South, same in the West, same in the Rockies, same in the Pacific Northwest. It's almost a poem, just without the Great Plains.
You gotta think, like, America's so big, just going from New York to Florida, there's so many differences there, and it's such a long way, you're gonna have different variations of accents. Yeah, it definitely stands out though. Like, if I was to go up to New York, everybody would know that I'm from somewhere down south. Same way if I went over to the UK, I'll be like, what the hell is that thing?
And finally, I've touched on this before, you know, I think that Americans, much like Germans, often get this reputation that they don't have a sense of humour. What we actually mean when we say that is they don't have a British sense of humour. How dare America differ from that in any conceivable way? But they do. They even spell humour differently, which should have been our first clue. One of the chief accusations that you'll hear from the British is that Americans don't understand sarcasm. That to them, the concept of irony is reserved for the nation's industrial workers. That was a joke about iron. But this has never been my experience. Long before I moved to the United States, I recognized these very traits in the Onion, both the satirical rag and the vegetable, whose comedy doesn't get enough credit for how multi-layered it is. And if you're interested in this subject and you would like a more detailed breakdown on how these differences manifest, then check out my video, 5 Ways British and American Humour is Very Different. But that's it for this episode.
I think when it comes to humor, it really depends on the person. Like, everybody has a different sense of humor. Like, I feel like my sense of humor is closer to what y'all would call the British sense of humor. But honestly, you're not wrong. A lot of people take stuff way too serious here. But alright guys, that is going to do it for the 7 myths British people believe about America. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Do y'all actually believe these? Did you believe some of them, but you knew some of them weren't real? And maybe you have some that he didn't mention here. Let me know down in the comments. I'll try to respond to them and maybe tell you if it's a real thing or tell you my opinion on it. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, this was day 2 of 25 days straight for Reactmas. That, I was hoping that, you know, kind of caught on and rolled off the tongue a little bit more. It doesn't. But we're going 25 days straight, so if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any uploads. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to go out today, spread love, spread kindness, do something nice somebody day. I love you guys so much, I really do. Shit your X them out. Peace.